Hey everybody, John the Other here, obviously. And as some of you might already know, I live in the western province of Canada, which happens to be a nation ruled over by a feminist cuckold man-child and his feminist globalist controllers. As you might also know, the interim leader of our federal Conservative Party, not in government right now, is a woman named Rona Ambrose. And this female leader of the federal Conservative Party is the author of a bill which had its first reading on February 23 of this year, less than 3 months ago. This bill mandates that judges appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada must receive a specific suite of training created by radical sexual grievance industry advocates. Yes, I'm talking about the same people coining terms like "I believe survivors," which, when you consider in the context of criminal accusation, skips entirely over the part where a person who is accused enjoys the state of presumed innocence and inquiry into evidence and test of facts, and speeds right to the part of the legal system after a person who has been tried is found guilty. The phrase, "I believe survivors," is a conceptual erasure of due process and innocent until proven guilty. And this bill, which was written by the leader of my country's federal Conservative Party, would put the due process erasing activists in charge of training my country's judges. Bill C-337. The Canadian Judicial Council in April of this year issued a formal comment on this proposed bill, stating that putting victim advocates in charge of the training of judges would seriously compromise the integrity and the independence of the court, that independence being something which is required and guaranteed in the Canadian Charter. In other words, you cannot politicize the judiciary, or else you don't have a judiciary anymore so much as you have a pseudo-court whose mandate becomes the enforcement of one political viewpoint through the force of the courts and the police. One large step towards a third world dictatorship. Oh, sorry. Did I say the bill would put the due process erasers in charge of Canada's judges? Silly me. What I meant to say was, after the Canadian Judicial Council pointed out that the Canadian Charter's constitutional guarantee that the judiciary must be politically independent, and that Bill C-337 would violate that constitutional guarantee, the current Liberal government fast-tracked the bill, and it is now law. Now, aside from the gigantic middle finger being given to every single Canadian by our government, there's a little bit of a deeper problem than simply the ideological regressives running amok in the seats of power. The courts cannot be a policy tool of one political party without the loss of the function of the legal system as a foundation of civil society. If you live in a country in which the courts belong to one side of the political fence, then you do not anymore live in a functioning democratic system. You have become part of a tin pot dictatorship. Now, I mean no hyperbole when I say that. This is not a matter of the political mainstream swinging too far to either the left or the right. If we accept that one political ideology gets to inject their viewpoint into the training of judges, we have fundamentally departed from one of the ideas that make Western civilization exist at all. So the fast-tracking into law of Bill C-337, in which sexual grievance industry activists, who for more than a decade have been trying to erase due process, that's not just a swing to the frothy, fanatical, far left end of the political spectrum. That is a departure from one of the basic tenets of Western civilization. Now, justice, independent from politics, is gone. And even if it is the far, hard right wing who gets in at the end of the next election cycle, it was the Conservative Party's leader who wrote this morally and legally indefensible law that is now law. The only thing that's going to change with a political party change is who this gets used against. So, liberals, lefties, and Green Party people you lot should be more frightened than the outcast alternative right now, because it will not be the reasonable people on the other side of the political divide who next displace your party in power. It will be the angry and the crazy. And the weapon that you have made out of the courts will be turned against you. A politically independent legal system that is not just one party's policy tool is something we have taken for granted in the West, and in Canada, that is now gone. And who's going to complain? The mob does not have principles, and the mob has always loved a public hanging. But let's assume you're one of the very bad people listening to this, and you'd like to help an organization devoted to protecting the rights of the falsely accused. You can do so by donating to the Lighthouse Project through Patreon or PayPal, and the links to that are in the low bar. For everybody else, thanks very much for listening, and as always, have a lovely, lovely day.